Below is a comprehensive, expanded narrative based on your provided plot points. The scene is set in the world of the young and the restless, focusing on family conflicts and the struggle for personal freedom. This version is significantly longer, with added depth, emotional tension, and character introspection to create an engaging storyline that aligns with your instructions. Rebellion against control. In a quiet corner of the Newman Ranch, a place where countless family meetings had taken place over the decades, Nikki Newman and her daughter, Victoria, convened a discussion that had been a long time coming. The early afternoon light streamed through the large windows, illuminating the room's expensive furnishings and timeless artwork. The setting was serene, elegant, and quintessentially Newman. But despite the calm appearance, the atmosphere crackled with tension. They had gathered to address Victor's recent attempts to control his granddaughter Claire's love life. Claire's affection for Kyle Abbott, a young man from a family that the Newmans had historically been at odds with, was hardly a secret. And yet, Victor's response, his outright refusal to accept the relationship, shocked everyone who thought they knew him. This was not the first time Victor had tried to dictate the path of a loved one, but this time, it felt different. Something in the air told Nikki and Victoria that the family's future might hinge on how they handled this situation. Nikki, who had spent most of her adult life standing by Victor's side, was well-versed in how to confront her husband. She knew he would not listen if they approached him with anger or accusations. Instead, she planned to appeal to his humanity, his capacity for compassion, and the love he felt for their family. With a steadying breath, she turned to Victoria, who stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, a determined but worried expression on her face. Victoria's relationship with her father had always been complex. She admired his business acumen, respected his intellect, and cherished the moments he acted like a caring father. But she also knew he was capable of wielding control like a weapon, expecting obedience without question. And while Victoria had grown accustomed to forging her own path in both business and life, she refused to stand by and watch Claire be forced to suffer as she once had. This time, she and her mother would stand together against the old patriarch's iron will. When Victor entered the room, his posture was as rigid as ever. He carried himself with the silent authority of a man who had built an empire from nothing. His eyes swept over Nikki and Victoria, taking in their firm stances and resolute faces. He knew immediately what this was about, and a surge of impatience rose in him. He made his way toward the large armchair that seemed almost like a throne, appropriate for a man who often played the role of king in his family's lives. Nikki began softly, her voice warm yet insistent. "Victor, we need to talk about Claire," she said, hands folded in front of her. "We've all seen how you've tried to prevent her from seeing Kyle. We understand your concern for her well-being, but the way you're handling this is wrong. People, especially members of our family, deserve freedom in their lives. We can't bar them from loving who they choose." Victor's eyebrows lowered as he listened. He leaned back, crossing his legs, a gesture that conveyed both confidence and mild annoyance. "I'm doing what any grandfather would do," he asserted, his tone firm. "Claire is young, impressionable. She doesn't understand the consequences of tying herself to an Abbott. Our families have been at odds for decades. I will not watch my granddaughter suffer because of some misguided love affair." Victoria stepped forward, her chin raised. "Dad, Claire's feelings are her own. You can't expect to control every aspect of her life. She's not a child anymore. She's old enough to make her own decisions. We all know you mean well, but what you're doing right now is only pushing her away. Love isn't something you command or forbid, and the more you try, the more resentment you'll foster." A hint of anger flashed in Victor's eyes. He was a man who disliked being challenged, especially by those he cared about. "My dear Victoria," he said, voice dripping with fatherly condescension, "you have no idea what it means to protect this family's legacy. Claire is a Newman. That name comes with standards, expectations. If she chooses to defy them, I have every right to express my disapproval." Nikki's patience wore thin at that last remark. She remembered all too well how Victor's desire to control could leave scars. She softened her voice and attempted another angle. Victor, she began calmly, I know you want to keep Claire from heartbreak. I know your intentions aren't malicious. But don't you see what you're doing? By forbidding her to see Kyle, by threatening her security within this family, you're turning what might have been a natural part of her life, love, heartbreak, growth, into a battleground. You're taking away her freedom, her humanity. Victor remained unmoved. I'm only doing what's best. I've learned from experience. This is a cruel world, Nikki. Claire deserves better than aligning herself with someone who might ultimately betray her. I'm saving her pain, not causing it. Victoria shook her head, frustration brimming in her eyes. Dad, you're always worried about betrayal, about who's using who. Claire isn't your enemy, she's your granddaughter. You can't treat her like a business partner who failed to meet expectations. She deserves your trust and your love, not ultimatums and threats. The tension in the room rose to a fever pitch as Victor stood suddenly, his voice growing louder. Fine, he exclaimed, spreading his arms in a dramatic gesture of surrender. If you think I'm wrong, then I'll step back. Claire is free to do as she pleases. But if she regrets it, if she ends up hurt and alone, I won't be here to pick up the pieces. She can go running to the Abbotts for comfort. I'm done with it. A silence fell, the weight of Victor's words settling like a thick fog. Nikki and Victoria exchanged glances. They had achieved a sort of victory. Victor had given up his attempts at outright control. But the cost was high. His words carried a biting cruelty. If Claire followed her heart, he would disown her emotionally, cutting her off from the Newman name and all it represented. And let me make this clear, Victor added, voice calm now, almost chillingly so, if Claire chooses to marry Kyle, if she chooses that path, she should remove the Newman name from her life. I won't have it. She may come from this family, but I will not accept her decisions if they stand in opposition to what I believe is right. Nikki's heart twisted at the ultimatum. She knew this was classic Victor, a line drawn in the sand, a punishment for disobedience that would cast long shadows over their family's future. But this time, she refused to be cowed. Victor, she said, stepping in front of him, meeting his gaze with fierce determination, you may think this is protecting her, but it's not. It's abandonment. It's turning your back on your own flesh and blood because she dared to want happiness on her own terms. Victoria's voice joined her mother's, soft but steady. Dad, you've always prided yourself on family loyalty, but real loyalty isn't conditional. If Claire suffers heartbreak, we should be there to help her heal, not to say I told you so. This is not about right and wrong anymore, it's about love, empathy, and acceptance. Victor did not respond immediately. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and strode toward the door, each step echoing in the silence. Before leaving, he turned once more to his wife and daughter. You wanted her freedom, he said, voice now devoid of the warmth that had once defined him. Well, now she has it. But don't you dare blame me if it all goes wrong. As the door closed behind him, Nikki and Victoria took a moment to gather themselves. Outside, the late afternoon sun seemed to mock the darkness that had just unfolded within these walls. Nikki reached for Victoria's hand, squeezing it gently. We did the right thing, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Claire deserves to find her own way. Victoria nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I know. It's just. Claire will be crushed. She wanted her grandfather's approval so badly. And now he's essentially disowned her if she continues loving Kyle. Nikki's expression hardened with resolve. We'll stand by her. We'll reassure her that she's not alone. Victor's threats may seem overwhelming, but Claire needs to know that this family is more than just one man's will. You and I, we understand what it's like to be caught in his web. We know how it feels to break free. They would not let Claire walk this path alone. Together, Nikki and Victoria would speak with Claire, comforting her, assuring her that love was worth pursuing and that her identity did not depend on the Newman name alone. Yes, Victor's reaction had been cruel, but it was also a reminder that individuals within this powerful family could rise above its legacy of control and domination. Claire would soon learn of her grandfather's ultimatum. She would shed tears, question her worth, and doubt her chosen path. But Nikki and Victoria would be there every step of the way, reminding her that freedom was a gift, not a curse, and that true family support came without conditions. And as the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the ranch, the Newman family's future hung in the balance. The old guard had made its stance clear, but a new era beckoned. One where daughters and granddaughters were free to choose their own destinies, regardless of the name they carried. In the end, love would either shatter or strengthen them. Only time would tell, but for now, Nikki and Victoria stood firm, determined that Claire would not face her struggle alone.